So I want to end with a quick case study. So I often like to share this case study. I can't see all of you, so I'm just going to kind of talk through this one because it's sometimes good to get some of your thoughts. But I'm going to kind of give you this case study, and then we'll pause and take some questions and answer them that way. So I'm assuming that most of you know Elon Musk. Most of you know he's been up to running 3 companies in parallel, maybe now 2. But Tesla is one of those companies, and the big vision behind Tesla is building an all-electric vehicle. He took over the company in 2006 as the CEO, and one of the things he had put out as his vision was building an all-affordable electric car. Now, like a lot of entrepreneurs, there were lots of risks in that initiative. Even though you may say he had lots of resources to start with, he was already a successful entrepreneur, had lots of money to invest in the company, there were still lots of challenges. Because building a car is no easy feat. And so if we were applying this methodology, if we were starting with problems, not solutions, the thing we want to do is not fall in love with the electric car we're going to go build and just go build it and tell the world how amazing it is, but really try to understand what it's going to take to build that first car. What is the riskiest assumption? What would cause somebody to switch from an existing alternative, which in this case would be either a petrol-powered vehicle or it would be a hybrid vehicle of some sort, to an all-electric car? What is that switching going to take? That is fundamentally the question. The other way to ask this question of what is the riskiest assumption if you're starting out, I often tell people to think not of how they're going to get to scale. So don't think about how you're going to get your 100th customer or how you're going to get your 1,000th or 1 millionth customer if you're thinking that big, but rather think about customer number 1. Customer number 1 to me is your singularity moment. That's when you go from creating value out of nothing. That's when you actually create something that causes somebody to stop using something and start using what you have. And that's an amazing moment. That's a moment everyone should celebrate. Not many people do, but that's a moment everyone should celebrate. Now, of course, you can't celebrate for too long because 1 is never enough. You have to get a lot more than 1 customer, so you have to get back to work pretty quickly. But it's still a pretty significant event, and that's a great way to think of your riskiest assumption. So if you ask yourself, if you go back to 2006, what was the riskiest assumption for Elon Musk and Tesla? And the riskiest assumption, I'm just going to give you the answer. It's not the infrastructure. It's not how can we build over 1,000 vehicle. It's not all the charging infrastructure, but rather it's what would it take for somebody to stop buying a combustion vehicle and when they're in the market, seriously consider an electric car and maybe even go for it. So we already knew that at that time, global warming was a thing. There was already lots of reports out there. Al Gore had done his talk, and there was all this talk about carbon dioxide emissions. So there were people already beginning to buy hybrids for that reason. Gas prices or petrol prices were also rising, and so people were switching for those reasons. So we knew some of that was happening. But if you ask ourselves, what would it take to buy an all-electric car? The first question somebody would ask you is, how long does it take to charge and how far does it go? And that right there was problem number 1, is that back then the technology for batteries wasn't good enough yet. You could charge a car over many, many hours. It took 6 to 8 hours, but you could only go 50 kilometers on 1 charge, which for a lot of use cases here in the US and other parts of the world is just not enough. And there was a concept that had come out there, people had written about, called range anxiety, is if I bought this electric car, I would be worried about getting stranded on the side of the road because I wouldn't be able to get back. And there would be no charging stations, and what would I do? And so nobody would buy this car because of that anxiety. And so Elon Musk and his team had to solve that problem, and that became their riskiest assumption. That became the problem to solve. Now, once you have that clarity, once you know what is the first starting problem to solve, it simplifies a lot of other things. They didn't worry about the brand or the infrastructure or those types of things. They said, let's ask ourselves, how do we solve this one problem? And by doing that, they realized very quickly that what they were really trying to build that was different, their unique value proposition, wasn't really a car at the end of the day. It was really a battery. If they could build a better battery, they could put that in a car and sell that car as an electric car, and that's precisely what they did. So kind of fast forwarding the story, Elon Musk and his team went to another car company, in this case Lotus Motors, and picked a vehicle, and this was the Lotus Elise. It's a nice looking sports car, very expensive sports car, but they went to them and said, give us permission to retrofit a battery into your car, and in exchange, we'll pay your licensing fees. And Lotus went for it, and that's what they used. And so this is a classic example of thinking about riskiest assumptions first, not trying to get to building your own car and making it perfect and all those types of things, but really distilling it down to what is your riskiest assumption, what is your unique value proposition, and bringing that to light. So I like this example because it's a large-scale MVP. They may not call it an MVP, but it has that same elements of an MVP. And it's basically, it's in the lean startup world, we'd even call this a Wizard of Oz MVP, because it's cobbled together. If nobody knows that this is a car that was licensed, they would think that Tesla built this car in 3 years, and that wasn't true. By taking this shortcut, they didn't have to hire automotive engineers. They didn't have to get a factory. They didn't have to get good at building cars or design a car even, because all those things were working. All those things were already available. They were able to speed up the learning process and this continuous innovation mindset of putting a product to market pretty quickly, building the battery first. Once the battery got good enough, there was actually a stage 2 and a stage 3 for Tesla as well. And if you kind of look up their story online, you'll see that after this car, they built the Model S, which was a car they built themselves. And then after that, they built the Model X, which was kind of an intermediate, but then they built the Model 3, which is that realization of their vision. So that's their mainstream all-electric car that was priced at a $35,000 price point. And that's what they are beginning to roll out. There are already cars that you see on the roads now here in the US, and they're beginning to roll that out in a more massive scale in the coming months.